We are here with Carollyne Yardley and Rande, and in their new show, or the first show together, Ravenous, at Alcheringa Gallery. They have a very nice story here, and how they met, and how the whole thing started for them. So, who wants to start? Who wants to say how you met?
Well, I can start off by saying how we met. So we had first seen each other's work when Rande Cook's show Urban Thunderbirds, Ravens in a Material World, was on the curatorial side of the Art Gallery of Greater Victoria. And at the same time, Strangelings was in the Massey Gallery side, which was a show about art directors and former art directors in art. And so our works of art were in the building at the Art Gallery at the same time during that period of time. And we had both seen each other's pieces at that time. And then we met when we were invited by yourself for the show Differences in Repetition at the Slide Room Gallery, which riffed off of a Gerhard Richter painting, which had over 30 artists. And we met at the closing of that particular show, and Rande had seen that I had done a squirrel face in the Gerhard Richter that I had done, and we introduced ourselves at the closing of that show. So that's how we initially met. And from there, we sparked a great conversation just talking about art and our inspirations and the things that we're working on. And I asked if I could come to his studio to see some of the different things that were going on there. And I did.
So, and what happened then?
Well, we just got talking. I mean, after me and Carolyn were talking at your art show closing, I kind of just started, we started talking about business and the business side of being artists and on and on. And then when she came, I had an idea of doing something together. I thought, well, more than anything, I mean, we like to enjoy life, and we got to be artists and celebrate life and enjoy what we do. And I thought, collaborating and doing something would be really exciting. I mean, you can't, beat her laugh in any way.
Contain it for this interview.
But yeah, I think, more than anything, of just the possibility of seeing what could come of a collaboration, and Ravenous is what it is, as you can see some of the work. So.
And when I went to Rande's studio, the conversation led into some of the works that I had done that he had seen, were me showcasing or reimagining other contemporary artists in my version of their work. And Rande had suggested that I paint him in his regalia. So we immediately set up a photo shoot, and so the pieces, at least my contribution to the show, are pieces that came about from that photo shoot. So that was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So besides this idea of having both working with different styles and everything, the show means something else, like, for you?
Well, I think, the painting Ravenous, which is coming from Ravens in a Material World, and just the meaning of, the painting alone. The show talked about, spirituality and this high, this fast-paced world we live in with commercialism, consumerism, all these different things. But, we're both acting as artists in the present. We're both addressing the issues of the present, what's happening in our surroundings of today. So I think, the parallels are already there, which is really cool. And then I think, just the fact that putting a squirrel on everything, and then coming from a First Nations background where we have so many different masks and they all have meaning, but it's kind of like the emotion behind it as well. So even within the humor and everything that we're doing, there's still these layers of emotion, whether it's secrecy or things that are bad or things that are good. They're all there, and there's all these different layers that we have to peel away. but we're not really necessarily peeling them away. We're kind of building them up by putting masks on things and kind of letting the viewer walk away with their own interpretation, which is exciting in its own self as well. So coming together and doing a show like that, I think is really exciting. Yeah.
So for you, Carollyne,
Well, for me, it was a chance to be able to, first of all, the regalia itself is spectacular. So that particular painting, for me, was the most ambitious just as a piece of work itself. But what I liked a lot about it was where we have the Secrets of the Squirrel Mask juxtaposed with, let's say, the Vatican Mask, which was also in the Urban Thunderbirds show. And that was a real pivotal piece in Rande's work at that show. And then to be able to actually work with it a mere 6 months later after, for me, was pretty amazing. And again, the juxtaposition of removing that mask, but yet there's another one still there to be revealed. And I quite enjoyed kind of riffing off of the story of Raven itself. So we've got two different stories in this show. We've got the story of Trickster Raven, and we have the Secrets of the Squirrel Mask incorporated together. And the other piece that I did, which actually is the raven's head itself, was also from the raven that was Rande's carving that was in the Urban Thunderbirds show. So it's folding a lot of the different stories together.
so it's interesting to me. I think that two artists from quite different backgrounds, you will say, get together and do a collaboration work. So can you talk
Work
about
in our own spaces and, talk through email, meeting once in a while, grab coffee, talk about more so than anything, the meaning of the work, and the place that the work is coming from. And I think connecting on that level has been more exciting, not just about like the artwork, but I mean, getting to know somebody and getting to know another artist and understanding the way another artist views the world and connecting and not realizing actually how many parallels there are between. I mean, at first it was like an idea about having fun, and then after, like through, I don't know how many conversations, discussions, we're like, oh, wait a second, we're like, yeah, so yeah, it makes it exciting.
So we've definitely been recontextualizing, I guess, the pieces of our work into each other's work. So that would be speaking to that directly as well.
yeah, the personal level also you met and you became friends, right?
Yeah.
So it's such a nice thing.
I think the collaboration is, as we probably have talked between the two of us as well too, each piece was not necessarily worked on by both of us, I think is accurate. So a true collaboration is not, we didn't work on the same piece together. But the story themes definitely did weave through. So when you're talking about metaphors, or you're talking about allegory in the works, if you know a little bit about the story of Raven, which Rande can share, and you sort of start looking at the different stories that are told here, then that's where you see where the overlap is.
So what's the story of Raven? Tell it again.
Tell it again, yeah, right. Well, there's the traditional story which is shared amongst the coast, and every nation has their own, but there is a common thread about, the raven who had released the light to the world. And, I've heard the story over and over, and then I started thinking about it. It's kind of like as you get older, you're more inquisitive, and you're starting to find metaphors and real answers within whatever it is that you're doing, because you need to find a real meaning. And I think it's kind of symbolic of life itself, right? We need to ask ourselves, what are we doing? Why are we here? And what are the next steps that we're going to take in life? So for me, I kind of started to resonate with the story about the raven, because Raven releasing the light to the world, I mean, the metaphor, which is so parallel to the Bible in itself and the coming of Christ, and it was like before Jesus had come, and the metaphor through Immaculate Conception on and on, that he was going to be the messenger that would shed light on the world, and there's all this chaotic war and darkness and things like that. It was the same in our culture, because it was about a chief who had a daughter, and she went to go fetch water, and the raven was watching, and the raven knew the chief was holding the light and wanted to get close to it. So he transformed himself into a fern which floated down a river, and she fetched water, and the fern went in. When she went in, she drank the water and became pregnant because she drank the fern. So it was the same, similarities. So anyway, she gave birth to a son who was the next coming of, because we're patrilineal, he was going to be the next chief. So the chief, her father, was grooming him to be the next leader. But through his trickster ways, he transformed back into the raven and fled with the light, stealing the light from the chief and sharing it with the world. The funny part of the story, though, is just he didn't really want to share the light. He wanted it for himself. And that's the greed and all the different layers of the raven. But, and they say in the beginning of time, too, the raven was white. So when he transformed back into the raven, he fled to the smoke hole. All the soot made his feathers black. And they say he had a softer song as well, but the fires burnt his tongue, and that's why he's got the really harsh sound that he has today. And then in burning his tongue, he opened his beak, and then the stars and the sun and the moon and all those elements of fire rose to the sky. So just, in that story, I keep finding like the metaphors behind it, like what is that all about? And just thinking about like the steps in life that we take today and shedding light on everything. I mean, Ravenous itself, the painting, is kind of like the opposite. It's like the greed of that the raven had as well. And even, the word ravenous. But I mean, high fashion and what we're faced with today, and consumerism and commercialism and all these different things. I mean, Facebook and, what is like the real true meaning. But anyway, so a lot of the issues that that are asked, and it's like the squirrel mask, right? What's beneath the squirrel mask, and so it's peeling away the layers and asking about that meaning.
Well, as that is a story that Randy told, that is, I am telling a story that is part of my identity, and so. Over the last few years, the use of the squirrel face has been used as a branded mechanism or story of repetition over and over and over again. And the story changes as the characters are changing, but how people identify with it now, it's almost kind of, it's got its own story that's being created that is then also being able to speak to people about how they are perceiving the characters. So again, where Randy's story is talking about has an allegory and metaphor for the betterment of the world and the raven who is doing something that inadvertently brought light to the world. The squirrel face is making people think about how maybe people are perceived, or the perceptions that people have based on clothing and hairstyle. And a lot of my work is talking about the entity within. We don't have a choice to the meat body that we get, and there's somebody in behind here that isn't always completely apparent when you first meet somebody. And sometimes it takes many, many, many years to discover, even to yourself, who is actually this spirit energy that lives inside you. So I guess part of my story, and maybe I've gotten lost here in connecting the two just for the purposes of this video, but for me, that's what the squirrel face is representing, is that you really need to look a lot deeper through what you initially perceive as what you think it is, and you need to dig deep into actually maybe investigating what the story actually may be telling you.
Well, maybe the question is what do you think the response is going to be? And then I want to know what do you think being involved in this situation?
It's been a common question already. People saying, it's very brave of you to kind of take the step, where I'm thinking the reverse, actually. And I'm thinking, it's about time somebody's actually has done this and has collaborated with an artist that has such a strong background. And stylistically is just so amazing. But just to allow somebody in to collaborate on that level, not in the sense of like actually sharing and working on the same pieces, but through interaction. And what Carolyn sees and what she creates is her vision. and you know what she puts down is, you know, that's coming from her, and I was just, you know, posing, you know, in the studio kind of thing. But I mean, you know, me putting on my regalia and stuff like that, I mean, it's honest. It's who I am, and I'm sharing with somebody. In a way, I'm not inviting her into my studio to pick up my knives and start carving and to go and give her something, you know, that is sacred in that way, to go and commercialize it and sell it. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it's relationship building. I mean, we're both artists and we're both creating. So for me, I like that, and I think it's the most important statement, really. I mean, from a cultural sense, where I'm coming from, there's just, you know, there's a lot of questions that need to be asked, which is good, and that's what I want. And that's, I think, more than anything we're ready for. And I think that's about doing the show is asking those questions and thinking about breaking those barriers and allowing ourselves to think about what unity is in this world of being artists, you know, and whether it's an international concept or if it's just a local concept. We all work in the same arena. We're all artists, so.
For you, Carollyne?
Well, for me, Rande and I have talked all the way through building pieces for this show, and I was invited to do portraits of Rande, and they are portraits of Rande. So that's sort of, I don't know if that adds a different component to it, but I feel very similar to Rande. I've been looking for people to collaborate with, and following different artists' work, and I think it's a real pleasure to be able to do a collaboration with someone else's work, especially as esteemed as Rande and the people that he has worked with and studied with, and the knowledge that he has as well, having been in the art industry for over 20 years. Anyways, it's a huge wonderful experience for me, but I feel the same way, as being able to collaborate with other artists so that we can see how the work, what happens when you add and you're inspired. I'm inspired by many different artists. It's been shown in my work all the way along, and this is like, as I'm weaving through the inspirations that I've had, this is a time and a place right now where I worked with Rande Cook in the year 2014, and these pieces were are to immortalize that in many ways.
Yeah. And same. I just made the first squirrel mask ever.
Well, actually, my next question was going to be about the squirrel mask. And is a little story in the indigenous culture about the squirrel? There is something. It is.
Yeah, no, we have.
Every animal has.
Yeah, we have stories, but I mean, they're all spirit.
Squirrel stories?
Yeah, there's everything has a spirit, so we call them spirit animals, right? And they're sacred. But when we're carving, and the things that are actually really, you know, touched on, are more significant than squirrels. You know, need to have a stronger entity, yeah, I haven't seen one. I mean, I've heard there's stories with the squirrels in them and stuff, but they're not a part of the big, like, ceremonial use and stuff. Yeah, you know, so, yeah, so, I mean, it makes it that much more interesting.
So you think it's the first one ever made?
I have never seen one or known of one being made or anything, so.
Yeah. So does.
Yeah. And I put a squirrel in my painting as well, so.
That's right.
Yeah. You know, and it's the same thing, right? Reflecting, because I think it's important. I mean, really, as artists, you know, creating for today and talking about the relationships and where we were at in this period of our lives, and having the works, you know, hopefully outlast us. Yeah, and again, it's peeling those layers away. What is behind the mask? What is behind the squirrel mask? Again, you know, we all come full circle, and it's about our own meaning. You know, it's our own interconnection with each other, and it's the way we view the world and coming together in a good place, you know? And that's, you know, I mean, if we can all function at a certain level of, I don't know, honesty, I guess you can say. I mean, you know, then I think, you know, we're progressing. As artists, we get locked into our own studios. We don't, you know, really get out to see the world, but when we do, we view it from our own, like a different perspective. You know, we're unique that way, I guess when you say artists. You know, we see colors that nobody else can see. And then we go back and lock ourselves up again and then create it, you know? And then when we do get out to get to interact with each other, that's what collaborating and doing shows together makes it so special.
It would be a shame not to be able to collaborate
Yeah.
with each other in our work, and I'm not sure how else we would have been able to do it as we've done here.
Yeah. Came in after, you know, Ravenous, right? Mm-hmm. And then when you
That's
think
right, the
about the
idea for
meaning
the-
of Ravenous and just how the title is just perfect, like you were the one that suggested it, and it just made it that much more perfect when you really think about what Ravenous means.
And riffing off of the show that the Ravenous painting was in as well too.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, the word ravenous itself is wanting more, wanting to eat more, to do something more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at that exact moment that perhaps Mandy and I met, we were both exploring what we wanted to do something more with our work, what was coming next. So that has something to do with it too.
That's it. And that's it.
And that's a wrap.
That's Ravenous.